Hey, I'm John Chen. I'm the CEO of GeoTeaming, and I'm here with this amazing session around inclusion and ADA on team building and meetings. I'm here with my amazing guest, Joan Eisenstodt. Good morning, Joan. How are you?
Oh, John, hi. This is so fun. I'm so glad we're doing this, and thank you for getting up so early on the West Coast to do it.
Absolutely. I'm here for you, right? This is what some of the things we're talking about, which is accommodation is actually one of the right things. So, Joan, could you just talk a little bit about what you do in your other life when you're not with
Yeah, in my other life. So let me give you the short background. So I've been in the meetings, the broad meetings industry, hospitality industry for more than 40 years. I started my company in 1981, and at that time I did full service meetings. At one point I had a staff. I've gone back to full consulting and working on my own because I'm a strong introvert and I love being alone. So the things that I always say that I use my right brain on helping to design conferences, and I use my left brain because I absolutely love working on hotel and other vendor contracts. I love language. And so that's what I do. And I testify as an expert witness in the industry, and I do a lot of training. And some of the training I've been doing, and I will do a shout out and thank you to Nisa Silzer in Connecticut, Canada. That she and I came up with a session some years ago on inclusive meetings, and we started doing it, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's the issue of inclusion is important to me. And just let me do one other quick note on that piece of it. Many years ago, I served as a delegate to what was then the Convention Industry Council, and Liz knows now it's now the Events Industry Council. And when I was a delegate from MPI, what was interesting is that Cricket Park, who was then with an organization called AHEAD, and was really the leading person in hospitality dealing with issues of disability and talking about it, came to talk to us when the ADA passed.
Wow.
And there were so many things I had not known. I was sort of aware. I mean, until my own disability became greater, I didn't know as much, but Cricket was the expert, and she came to us and talked about the ADA and the implications.
Mhm.
She, after that, wrote a book and then wrote a white paper for PCMA, both of which sadly are out of print. She's now an Episcopal priest. She moved from Ohio to, in fact, Bethesda, Maryland, and we're still good friends. But she really was my inspiration. And then I got to know Kai Feldblum, who was, it's considered either the mother, the aunt, or some part of that in writing the ADA. And she's now a commissioner
Wow.
on the U.S. Civil Rights Commission.
Wow. 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 I mean, landmark to work on legislation like that, that really has changed the affect for so many people and really made a difference. And so, all right, well, again, my name is John Chen. I'm the CEO for GeoTeaming. We specialize in corporate team building and leadership programs that use technology and adventure. And obviously inclusion is something that's a big portion of what we do. And occasionally ADA is something important that what we do. So in this event, Joan and I really got inspired by this movie. It's called Defending Your Life. Defending Your Life. I'm just going to show about 60 seconds or so of this movie so you kind of understand, and then we'll explain what defending your lifestyle is. And so in this meeting, for about the first half, Joan and I are just going to trade back, and we're going to put each other on trial, as you'll see here in just a second, with some of the things that we've done. And then we're actually going to open up. We have a great audience that's starting to form here, and we'd love to make sure and share with them. So let me show this clip. We'll introduce our audience, and then we'll see where we're going to go. So give me 1 second while I share my screen. There we go. So take a moment to, hold on a sec. I got to share the audio. Otherwise, you're not going to hear this. I can do this.
Yes, you can. I know. I have great faith in you.
There we go. All right. So let's show this little clip from Defending Your Life. If I can hit the play button. There we go.
With a click, with a shock, from a jingle, door may knock, under the light. Something's coming from away, but it's in
From the beginning of motion picture history, Hollywood has tried to show you what the afterlife is really like.
Good afternoon and welcome to Judgment City.
You have any idea what's going on?
No?
Well, in a nutshell, you're here to defend your life, and I'm going to help you.
Defend my life?
Finally,
Wow!
the first true story of what happens after you die.
Where am I? Is this heaven?
No, it isn't heaven.
Is it hell?
Actually, there is no hell. Although I hear Los Angeles is getting pretty close.
I tell you, you carry yourself very stiffly.
Leave me alone. I'm dead. That's life.
Albert Brooks,
You make me think of my little poodle.
Meryl Streep,
I think I might have been a heavy-set man at one time.
Rip Torn, Lee Grant, Buck Henry, in a new film by Albert Brooks.
So I'm on trial for being afraid.
Well, first of all, I don't like to call it a trial. Second of all, yes.
If you see one movie before you die,
I love you.
I love you!
This is damn exciting stuff.
see Defending Your Life.
And there we go. So there's Defending
Thank
Your
you.
Life.
People love it.
So let's see if I can stop share. Here we go. So just so if you kind of get the idea, right, is Albert Brooks. It was so great to see this. That's Meryl Streep too, right?
Yeah, it's Meryl Streep.
And
Rip Torn, I mean, Buck Henry, an incredible cast. And to me, the meaning of it, I remember when I first saw it and then had to own it because I have an old VHS tape and a DVD of it because to me it's the lessons in it are immense.
so again, Albert Brooks dies unexpectedly, and then he has to go on trial for his life. And they actually flash these pieces of his life. Some of them really good and inspiring. Some of them where he fails to do the right thing, and you get judged on your life. And of course, if you don't pass, you have to go back to Earth. You're sent back, and if you do pass, then you might go on to whatever's next. And so it's kind of the style that we'd like to do. So Joan, we've got a great audience here, so I'm going to just take a moment to have people introduce themselves. So just say your name and where you're working, and then what your interest is in either inclusion or ADA. If you could keep it short, would be much appreciated. I'm going to go through the screen around the left-hand side. So Bob Langley, I'm going to start with you first.
Good morning. I am a travel manager for a manufacturing and medical device manufacturing company in Northwest Pennsylvania. We're about 40 miles south of Erie. Jen, when you said the weather was coming and it was coming together, we start to snow in about a week or two, and we don't stop till February, so we get about 250 inches. And then I'm also cross-functional. I do sales here, screen the incoming leads and whatnot, and then I have about 20 years experience with an independent contractor and do meetings, events, and just leisure and corporate travel. So do a little bit of everything. Joan and I, we met, it was 1996. So we've known each other quite a long time. I have interest in the ADA. I'm a cancer patient myself, and that's one of the ADA inclusions. So this was of interest to me, and I've been following a lot of these things closer now because I didn't realize, how much it affects that. And then also, we have the ADA here, but experiencing some things outside of the country with some family or myself having this disability has been a challenge and interesting. So
no ADA in Europe.
I want to jump in too because aren't you still an office holder?
Yes, I am a councilman here in our local area. So my term ends January 4th. We're a third-class city. We have about 14,000 people, but 70% of the people that live in our community are on some sort of government assistance program or whatnot. So we have a lot of people locally that are utilizing services that are available to us, through the ADA. So it is something that we keep a close eye on because we're also county seat, but we have a lot of organizations right here in our community that actually support those functions. So, and I've worked with a lot of them, so it's somewhat important to me. So 5 years of doing that has me, I have a different perception. much different than I did when I was younger. So,
well, thank you for your service, and more importantly, congrats on being a cancer survivor. So,
yeah, I'm still kind of challenged with it. We have a few things going on, but I'm close to Cleveland Clinic, which makes it nice. So,
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Liz?
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Dombrowski. I'm with the Events Industry Council. I work on the certification team here, and I am here to actually get a little teaser because Joan is kindly teaching a very similar session in a few weeks at our event, and I just couldn't help myself. I want to see what we were going to talk about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Liz. And so I guess that's your interest in the inclusion in ADA is what's Joan going to say next?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And my interest for Liz is how she can also help push the Events Industry Council to be stronger on these issues, because that's our industry has a big role in this, as we'll begin to talk about, John, when we get more into the body of this.
Perfect. Okay. Let's see. I think Kara Gray, if you are here, you are next.
Good morning, everyone. I work for a contract with Pennsylvania Department of Education to provide training and technical assistance to schools throughout the state of Pennsylvania. So I am up your way sometimes. Sometime, Bob, we'll have to connect and maybe have lunch sometime. And I have been somewhat of an advocate here for my organization. We are part of an intermediate unit which services actually a good part of the state with the work that we do. And try to be an advocate for our meetings and events to make sure that we're being very respectful of disability issues. Also, after a bad car accident 2 years ago, I've been left with some chronic pain issues myself. And as someone once said, we're all aging into disability. So with age, finding that to be a concern too. So
perfect.
That's my perspective.
Thank you, Kara. I know I just celebrated my 50th birthday, and that age starts to catch up. And we got to talk about, the boomers is like the growing number of people. I actually was at the Microsoft alumni reunion, and like the top 3 executives all talked about in the last 5 to 10 years had a significant health challenge that changed their perspective in life. So it looks like we have Mark with us too. Mark, are you there?
I sure am. My name is Mark Crozier. I work with Heidelberg Engineering, just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm a trade show and event manager, corporate trade show and event manager, and I've known Joan for years and have sat through a lot of sessions with her. And she's just such a wealth of knowledge that every session I sit in with her, I learn something new. And I plan a lot of not just trade shows, but corporate events and sales meetings and dinners and things like that. I actually reached out to Joan earlier this week to let her know an issue I'm having with a hotel and how they're not, I'm looking for inclusion and they're not being very cooperative with that.
I would say, Mark, that they don't get it at all. So I think you're being really polite about it, but you are. So
I love how subtle Joan is for the most part. So that's some part of your interest too. It's part of your daily job is what you're looking for. Is that right?
It is, yes.
Okay. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, let's see. Let's go here. S. Bowman is right next to you. So
that's Suzanne.
That would be yes, Sue. I am currently working for the Construction Specifications Institute, and I've known Joan for a long time too. We share many different kinds of interests, but I was interested in building the team aspect of this webinar. So I'm not in the trade show meeting planning, although we have meetings, and our population is aging. But I just wanted to kind of tap into the building the diverse team aspect of the webinar.
Fantastic, Sue. Well, I'm here for you. I'll try and use my 20 years of experience to help you out. Let's see, we got 2 more. Let's, Mitch, would you like to take a minute? Let's see, do we already introduce Mitch? No, not yet, right?
Hello.
Oh, hi, Mitch. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Just take a moment to introduce yourself and your interest in inclusion in ADA.
My name is Mitch Biersner, and I'm a meeting planner with the American Society of Radiologic Technologists out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm here I know that there's never enough to know about this, and I just am hoping to understand more and just become more aware with our meetings. I know with our governance meeting especially, we have some attendees that have mobility issues. And so just trying to work with the hotel and making sure that the room sets when we say set them to capacity. And then I go check them, and I know that the attendees can't get in with their scooters or what challenges that might present, that just to kind of become more aware of similar issues like that. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Mitch. And then the last one here, it looks like we have Cricket.
Yep, Cricket. Cricket, I introduced you earlier and talked about how you are my guru, and you are the reason I got to know so much about the ADA when you spoke at what was then the CLC. I even called it the CIC, but the CLC meeting when the ADA was first passed. So I sort of talked about you, but you should introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Cricket Park, and I'm a former meeting planner and association executive, but now I am the rector slash pastor of the Episcopal Church of the Redeemer in Bethesda, Maryland.
Wow.
But just because I'm no longer in the quote industry, I'm still planning meetings. And the inclusion of people with disabilities is still very, very important to me. So here I am.
I'm grateful, Crick.
Well, we're grateful for you, and thank you for all the work that you've done here. All right, so again, we're going to take this first part, and Joan and I are just kind of lead off, and we're going to take this defending your style. By the way, in defending your style too, you know, the thing about it is that you can eat as much as you want and you'll never get fat.
Right.
You know,
that's why. Yeah, I'm looking forward. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that part of defending my life, because my thought is whatever they show, it won't really matter, because afterwards I can go eat 10 lobsters and never gain weight. So for me, that seems like a really good thing to do.
I'm just going to pretend like it's actually working for the next 60 minutes. So. All right. So Joan, let's take this, again, he puts their life on trial. So what I thought we'd do is we'd put some events or things that we've seen in the past, and we'll just trade, like you do one and I'll do one for a few minutes here, and talk about either the best uses of ADA and inclusion or sometimes the worst examples of ADA and inclusion. So
John, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be, I think, probably more difficult for me to find the best, because I'm still not seeing them, although I can come up with a couple. I will tell you that one of the worst that I'm dealing with pretty much weekly when I travel is the airline industry, and I had to learn this part, that airports and airlines do not abide by the ADA. They have their own disability rules, and they are not nearly as inclusive or as helpful. And even when the airlines have policies around how to help people with disabilities, they sort of slough off what their responsibilities are on others. And that's one. And it's interesting to me, because if we think about meetings or events or team building, often people have to get to someplace in order to participate. And so if they have trouble getting there, if the obstacles are so great, whether it's getting the wheelchair at the airport, or the airport and TSA and others have nobody who signs or can even help somebody who's deaf or someone who's blind or low vision. And what I find so interesting is that it has become a greater challenge. I worked with the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf for about 4 years, and I saw what was difficult. So while I'm on that, let me do a quick what was very positive. One of the things that they do in their contracts is that they require that any facility they're going to hire interpreters who are certified by their organization to come and train the people in the hotel in all departments. And I will do a shout out to a specific hotel. Normally I won't name names, but this was impressive. So a number of years ago, not that many, they were probably 3 or 4, they were at the JW Marriott in Indianapolis. And not only did the staff do the training, at the end of the meeting, they recorded a wonderful video signing from all the staff their thank yous and other messages. And to me, that went way above and beyond. Now, I'm not followed up. I'm hoping that they're still using what they learned and doing it. So for me, that was a very big deal.
That's, that's fantastic. And again, having the training in multiple languages, so that I think that's probably an industry thing that we don't talk about, which is sometimes people with, I guess, ESL are doing a lot of the work that makes a lot of this stuff happen. Does that sound about right?
Well, it's ESL, it's ASL. It's, to me, if we're talking about, I know we're talking mainly about ADA issues, which are more specific. To me, to have people in a facility, in a hotel or convention center with an airline that speak other languages. I know when I fly, I watch with heartbreak people who speak other languages, and no one on the airplane or with the airline can. I had dinner recently with Donna Brandwine, who is, this is my term, although maybe hers too, that she's a black belt in signing, and she signs for theaters in Chicago and for others. She was during the beginning of the Puerto Rican crisis, when people were being evacuated from Puerto Rico. She was called by the city's diversity and inclusion person, the person who deals with ADA, and asked to come to O'Hare and to be there, to be able to sign for anybody who was coming in, people who were clearly shell-shocked from going through 2 hurricanes. But she was there in order to help anybody hear and communicate with the airline personnel and with the city about what their needs were. Wow. So there are things that can be done, and people are doing them. In my experience, it's just not enough.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Joan. One of the things around here too is that it's so right. A lot of these things can be solved starting just with people, right? There's a lot of other things like ramps and, vehicles and things like that. But I do believe that the people aspect is really one of the keys. You talked about the airlines. I just want to bridge on that because, I experienced this. My mom, when she flies to me, she is, she has a walker, but when she travels far distances, we use a wheelchair. And my shout out is for Alaska Airlines because, there's all these things that you can do that some people don't know, which is she's well enough that she can take the wheelchair to the door, and then she can walk to like row 6 or something up front. And then they store the wheelchair and they bring it back to her. And then they roll her out. And then again, you can ask for service, which is, someone that'll you just roll her from the door there. And if you're smart enough, and early enough, you can go in and you can get a boarding pass, right? I actually don't have a flight, but because I have an ADA passenger, I can do that thing that we used to do at airports, which is meet somebody at the gate, right? And so those are all things that really make that experience great for her. It makes it easy for her, and it's, again, being greeted by myself as soon as she gets out the door is something that's very reassuring for her. I once missed that, and then I had to chase the guy who's pushing the wheelchair around in baggage, and it took us a while to coordinate, and so it's better when
and I want to add to that, John, because what's interesting is that, and I'm always fearful of calling out somebody because the fear of a lawsuit. But here's what's interesting. I'm TSA pre-check, and I, like your mother, I walk with a cane. I use a mobility scooter to go more than a block at home, and I need a wheelchair at the airport. So here are a couple interesting things. Most airports have a rule, or I don't think it's part of the law, but who knows? They have a rule that if you have a mobility disability, this is just, to me, it's hysterical, that you have to come into the airport and go to the counter in order to get the wheelchair. All right, so think about this. I can't walk far, but I'm supposed to get from the cab or the car into the airport to get my wheelchair. Now, and it's in my record, it's everywhere. The second piece of that is that I've missed flights, as have many other people, even though you're supposed to have the wheelchair service, but the wheelchair services at the airports are contracted. And here's the airport that if we could do anything, it's funny in a horrible way. Las Vegas has, they have pre-check, and I go to the pre-check line, and I have to go through this at least twice a year when I go there to do programs. The pre-check lines gate reader to pass through there. So the wheelchair can go up to the gate reader, but the reader cannot read the badges of the people who push the wheelchairs, even though they are employees. So what I've had to do is find a willing stranger, and think about the liability in this. So a willing stranger who will take me from there to the place where I put my luggage up, while that person who pushes the wheelchair goes to another place and goes around, right? So there are all of these interesting issues that I think until people experience it themselves, or like you with your mom, have no idea that this is an obstacle to getting there. I've been at even pre-check where people who are deaf or hard of hearing don't understand the instructions. There's no one there to interpret for them. And so, you know, and I'm thinking about what each of the people who are here said and those who will listen later. And Suzanne, I'm thinking about what you said about having this with team building. I think if you think about how can we get people to participate, you know, what will be the opportunities and obstacles to ensure that they can have the mobility, the hearing, the sight, whatever it might be. And John, I also want you to talk about, because when you and I first talked about this, I was so impressed with some of the things you said about how you do inclusion with team building, because it's not been my experience in most cases when people do that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So, okay, I'm going to move to that topic then. So one of the best examples, you're going to put me on trial for this, is like,
yeah, I am.
One of the programs we do, I thought an example for this, again, all experiential education, if they're studying with places like AEE, the Association of Experiential Education, or other places, they run off a concept called challenge by choice. So if you've ever done a ropes course or anything else, people talk about challenge by choice. And to me, my interpretation of challenge by choice means that you don't have to do things the way that I show you how to do them, but you'll have a choice, right? So that there is a way for you to participate. So it may not be the way that everyone else is participating, but there is a way. And again, challenge by choice also says, you know, we challenge you to do something that's by your choice, that's something slightly more that you would do, but not something that's going to put you in the panic zone and be a terrible and traumatic experience. And so challenge by choice is the principle that we really use inside of there. And in this one event, it turned out to be, we do this great program. It's our 12th year of collaborating with this Disney award-winning middle school teacher. She's one of the greatest people that I've got to meet and get to work with. And she has 90 students, and people have lottery into the school. Like, they're so sought after that like hundreds of people apply for the school, and they're willing to drive, you know, further distances to get to the school because they know what kind of education that she provides for this. But that also means because it's a public school and it is by lottery, you know, they take anybody. And so if the child has a disability or whatever you might want to call it, I call it a learning enhancement quite often, but then they need to take them, and then they learn to accommodate for that. And she is an amazing teacher. She's even tutored my son, who, you know, like just had some problems with focus and like organizing at school, what kid doesn't when they're growing up. But she has these amazing systems and ways to do it. So anyways, she let us know that there's one of these students, and I think he's, either part autistic or Asperger's. And so on the physical side, like, he can't walk as far as most people. So during this event, we walk sometimes as much as 3 hours. And we knew that at some point that he might, you know, not want to walk any further. And so, and then there's how to gauge them. So in our event, ever since towards the beginning, we've always said that there's ways, you know, to participate. It may not be, again, the way that you think, but we can design, again, our event is styled on a high-tech treasure hunt. So you are moving around a city or a location and looking for things as a team. And it turns out to be a great team activity because you have to get everyone to make a plan and actually agree and do it multiple times. So with this person that she alerted us to, we made sure that we knew who he was. And we talked through with his parent about what he could and maybe not be able to do. And so we kind of knew that would happen. And so, you know, it's this fine balance too between not singling out, but being taken care of too. Because as the other part is, as a middle school student, the last thing that you want to do is be special treated or singled out when all your friends are around. So anyways, we had a geotech on there that is one of my coworkers. And the best part is one of her greatest skills is she's super empathetic. And so when she was,
I know somebody she could do some teaching with, but I won't go there.
Yeah, consulting. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so so she did this, and then of course, like somewhere around the event, like in the second half, like after lunch, she did started to tire out a little bit. And so what we plan on that is something what we call the home command team. So this home command team is, we always tell people too, like, I have a bad knee, or somebody's pregnant, or somebody, whatever it is that they can't potentially walk the entire time. They go in, and she was able to break him off from the team. So we told another team leader and said, he's going to head back. So he starts heading back. And the best part is she gets to have a one-on-one conversation with him about what's going on in the event, as we head back to the center where he can sit down and be dry or be warm and wherever else. And then when we went back to that, he actually becomes what we call the helpline. So his cell phone number, or cell phone that we give him, is actually available to everybody. And if they need help on a location, like they're stuck, they can call him. And now he actually has a little hint sheet that we give, and he's able to give clues to everybody. So the real key around this is that this person now is taken care of, but they're still part of the event. In fact, he liked this role better, because, he was like the phone a friend or the helpline,
right,
on a game show. And so he was more famous to more teams, by the end. And when his pictures actually came up on the slideshow at the end, like, the whole group cheered, right? Because they were just so happy that he could be there and he could participate. So to me, that's one of my greatest. I'd love to go to trial for that.
I was going to say, I think when that video comes up for you, you're gonna ace it, and even Lee Grant is not going to be able to take you down on that. And what I hear from that, and it's so interesting, is that you ask, and that's what I think we often don't do. I mean, but I'm hoping Cricket will jump in. I think by law, you are supposed to ask on a registration form, registration something, and I've been told that the language is, what do you need to fully participate? And I'm surprised that we don't see that on every registration form, or that we aren't asked, and more so that once we're asked, that accommodations are not made. And so to me, I love that solution. To me, that's exactly the way it should be, which made me think of another one about the participation. And this just happened on a phone call the other day. So I read a wonderful article and posted it in a number of places on social media about how often organizations, and those of you who are meeting planners know this, when we cut back on, or when there are cutbacks on spending, it's on food and beverage, and it's on audiovisual, right? So with audiovisual, what I often get in a session is, oh, I don't need the microphone. I have a big voice, right? I can talk, I can project. And so people believe that of course, everyone can hear, and we don't need to have that extra amplification. And so the article was so good about saying you can't make those assumptions. And when we talk about, when you talked about the aging issue, and a couple people mentioned that, what I find so interesting is among all age groups, there is a loss of hearing. And people are very uncomfortable about saying, no, I can't hear, or I wear hearing aids, or it's just not working for me. And so instead they'll try to muddle through, but they're missing out. And so if we don't take the initiative, whether it's in team building, or whether it's in a meeting, or no matter what it is, a social event, to ensure that the sound level for individuals to speak and to hear in some way is not great. So I think about all the receptions we go to where the noise is so loud that no matter what you do, you can't hear. So why don't we adjust things like that so easily that we can make it so much better?
Yeah, thanks for that, Joan, too.
Did you want me to jump in?
I would love for you to jump in, Craig.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, you do need to ask. Then so there needs to be something on a registration form that opens the dialogue, and how to fully participate is appropriate language. People still are not doing that. I actually had to correct one of the diocesan meeting registration forms not too long ago. When I was with a head, we had a very complicated registration form because we had so many people who were coming who had disabilities and had a myriad of different accommodation needs. But the organization does have to open the dialogue. And then the person with a disability is responsible also to respond, and in a timely manner, because you just can't automatically find an interpreter. You can't automatically find some of the technology that's necessary. If the venue doesn't have, for example, a phonic ear system for people with hearing aids, they need to rent it, and they can't necessarily do that immediately. So that's how the dialogue has to open up. Is that helpful, I hope?
Yeah, it's very helpful. Thank you. And one of the things I want to mention too is that although your wonderful book and white paper for PCMA are both out of print, what's interesting is that I think in one of the remarkable ways our government's working, that the Department of Justice website has amazing resources for meetings and for hotels, for convention centers, on how to be more accessible. Now, I posted earlier today, I'm terrified about HR 602, which is a bill that could be passed by the House and the Senate and could be put into law, that is going to, in a sense, dismantle the ADA and put the onus on the person with the disability to challenge not being included. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that we in the hospitality industry can't do more to not only set examples, but to include people. And so I hope, John, when I go on trial, that at least that I can get some points to maybe move on. Although the idea of coming back is not awful. I like the idea of reincarnation to try it again. But to be able to at least say, yeah, I at least brought the issues up, and I tried to make people aware, and I practiced what I talked about, and I taught things. Liz, thank you to EIC for letting Denise Settle and me do this. And I think that for us to be able to have that opportunity is what we have to do. And I there are so many ways that we could be inclusive, and I wish that among those listening now, and I hope maybe later, there are people from hotels, because what I find is hotels and convention centers and conference centers and restaurants are incredibly inaccessible. And before we talked, you and I had talked about what we were going to talk about. And one of the wonderful things in defending your life is not only do you get all your abilities back, or pretty much all of your abilities, but everything is pretty accessible. They have a tram that goes everywhere. You can get into your hotel pretty easily. The rooms looked like they were regular guest rooms. Although Meryl Streep's, if you haven't seen the movie, you'll see that Meryl Streep is in, to me, the equivalent of a Ritz-Carlton. Yes, and that Albert Brooks, because he's looking at more days than she is in the equivalent of, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I would say a single or a limited service hotel. And so there's so many more things that we can do. And to me, I think that the designers of hotels are going to have longer days, and the people who do the interiors of hotels are going to have many more days to look at than you and I are, John. And I'm glad they will. And I don't think they're going to go on.
Well, let me join in with that too. I actually have one that's related to a hotel, and you're right. Hotels and convention centers, they're the vessels for these events, and so they're the ones. When you go to a location, that you either spend the 16 hours at the venue or the 8 hours sleeping at the hotel. And my latest one around inclusion too is was very unexpected. So I ride a motorcycle of all things, right? And I was actually riding in June, and I had a 16-year-old teenage girl turn left in front of me.
God.
And I locked up the brakes, and then she panicked. So not only did she turn left in front of me, she hit the brakes.
Oh, God.
She left her vehicle in the intersection, and so therefore I collided, and physics starts happening, right? The right-hand side of my body hit a Jeep Cherokee. It was under 30 miles per hour, but still, in a motorcycle, it could be catastrophic. Luckily, I didn't break anything, but I did tear ligaments on my right side, especially my right ankle. And even though it was not a drastic hit, it wasn't catastrophic, but I was on crutches for 8 weeks. And so I had to do this conference, you know, summer, June, July, August, like in August. And I was still kind of crutching around, and the ankles is still swelling, right, from everything else that's going on. So I got to be in the hotel. I'll call this one out. It's a Cosmopolitan, right? It's a beautiful hotel.
Yeah,
and I do this whole conference for like 4 days. But you know, these 4 conference days, I mean, Oprah was the keynote speaker. So this conference is enormous. And so I just know that I'm going to be moving around a lot. And I just thought about it. And finally it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, I could rent a scooter. I'm in Vegas, right? And I just laughed. I'm like, oh, if I could just get the oxygen tank to go with it, I'd be perfect. Right? And so I rented this scooter, and bless the hotel. The hotel was Vidara, and it's actually not that expensive. It was $130 for 5 days. And it's an electric scooter, and I think Vegas probably subsidizes this because they want that kind of mobility for their guests, right?
I don't know that Vegas subsidizes. I know that when I go there, I use Desert Medical, which is a wonderful company, and I rent my scooters from them. It is a very not all cities are as easy to get a scooter, and they aren't all as reasonably priced. And to me, I think that we have to think about too is that even when people don't express even when asked, they don't express the need. What they don't often know, and Liz, I'm going to look at you and say this, they don't know the size of the venue, and they don't know that if they have arthritis or just knee problems, hip problems, that getting from their guest room to the meeting room may be very difficult. So to me, to offer and to say the hotel has this service and you may want to consider renting a scooter because here's the distance that you're going to have to traverse to get to and from all of the places you need to go. And I think that that's to me where that's where if we're defending our lives, that's to me where you've gone the extra step. It's Meryl Streep, and I'm going to now do a spoiler, but this is Meryl Streep running into the house to save the kitten when the house is on fire, right? So this is the extra step. This is, okay, you may not have told me that maybe it's tough for you to walk, but I know that among 100, 200, 10,000 people, there are going to be people for whom it's difficult. So we're going to figure out not only how to get you to and from, we're going to look at our buffets that we have for our meals and see if people can reach the food on them if they're seated in a wheelchair or seated on a scooter or on crutches. Because I think that what happens is we think about disabilities as being, I'm going to say, permanent. And that we don't think about the person who the weekend before the meeting decided to play some sport with their kids or with their friends and they break something. Or like you, who were just out riding your motorcycle and this horrible, to me, horrible accident happened. And you were lucky to be alive, but there are these issues. We don't know who's living with cancer, as Bob talked about during the introduction, and we don't know who may need some extra help in what they do. And so to me, part of this is it's anticipating, and it's not just saying what do you need to fully participate, it's making an assumption someone will need something and being ready with the resources to help them.
Yeah, thanks, Joan, for that. You know, it is true. It's having those resources. And you know what? Like the scooter doesn't come with a manual and it doesn't talk to anybody else. So, yeah, I'm going to give 3 highlights. There are highlights and lowlights about using the scooter. And by the way, any of you who are planners who are talking about, I'm going to plan for an ADA, on your site visit, rent a scooter and try and do the site visit on a scooter. And your perspective.
So wait, let me interrupt real quickly. So this is what we're doing at the EIC or the CMP Conclave. And there is an experiential part before, and this is what I just did at SGMP, and I've done it for PCMA and others, where people get to experience, and we've cleared this with a number of disability experts, because there are people who believe that pretending you have a disability is inappropriate. What we've learned is that until you experience it, you can't understand it. So people will have an opportunity, if they choose, to go around on a scooter, and we will give them lessons. So I want to come back to yours. They can wear earplugs and they can wear an eye patch. And they get to go through a half day of the meeting, if they choose, doing this, so that all of a sudden it's this totally different thing. So John, I wanted to interrupt that because that's, to me, it's part of it. Until you do a site inspection, using a device for mobility, or using something where you can't hear or where you can't always see, I think to me you're not doing your best job. So sorry, go back to your experience with the scooter and no manual.
No, I just think it's so important. And again, I have a bias of experiential, but I can tell you that it will definitely change your perspective on the meeting. And so like, here are the top 3 things. Number 1 is what I call the look. So one is, okay, as you can tell, right, I did admit that I was 50, but I do look a little younger, right? And Joan,
yes, we all agree.
And Joan, you know, my brand is around kind of being energetic at a conference. And so me on a scooter, at least not ever, it wasn't an industry conference, but you know, the look is when you're driving around on a scooter, and I didn't have anything visible anymore. Like I didn't have a big cast on my leg. All right. I actually stopped carrying my cane because it kept falling off and it was a pain, like it was a danger. And so I stopped carrying that around. But so people gave me that look. One of the looks is like, why are you riding a scooter? And the other one is either what's wrong with you, or I'm just not going to acknowledge you because I just don't know what to say to you. And so therefore you become invisible. And so I know I know many ADA people feel this way, which is like, everyone's uncomfortable because they don't know which one to do. Like, can I just be open and honest? Like, hi, can I talk to you? Or do I just ignore you because I just don't know what to say? And my favorite is the elevator. Like the elevator already is an awkward place, right? We're already all doing this.
Yeah.
And then I roll in with this big scooter in the center, right? And then the door would close. And the best thing I could do all week long was like invent which lines, right? like you know, what funny lines it is, like you know, oh, I'm an NFL football player. I'm not.
That's a good line.
No way I would ever make it in the NFL. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is unfortunately I have to call out my hometown, right? I actually tried to go to a Starbucks. So the cool part was I could do coffee runs for people because I could go all the way to the Starbucks, which in the Cosmopolitan is very far. You got to go all the way across the casino floor, and it's a far ways to walk. So people were like grateful, like, oh, John, you do a coffee run for us? That's awesome, right? Then I can stay here and do some more work. So I did a coffee run. I go all the way to the Starbucks. And literally the way that the line was set up with the ropes, I could not navigate the scooter, no matter how hard this thing could turn, through the lines. I ended up having to talk to the manager, and I said, hey, look, I'm just going to give you an ADA benefit. I said, I'm from Seattle, right? I love Starbucks. I just want to tell you, I can't get my scooter through here. They literally had to like drop all the lines and remove them and redesign them so I could get out after I got coffee. And so, you know, that was Starbucks on the low light. But then on the highlight is that there's a nightclub in the Cosmopolitan where they held their closing night, you know, networking reception. And it's really fun. But, you know, in the end, there's like 3,600 people at this conference. This nightclub was completely packed. I came in early and I forgot, and I left my scooter somewhere so I could like walk around and do the parts of the job that I have. But then I needed to leave before the end of the night so I could actually get some sleep for the last day. And all of a sudden I realized I got to get a scooter through a bar, and it's packed with nightclub style people, right?
Yes.
And here's the greatest thing. I talked to the Cosmopolitan and I said, hey, I gave them some warning. I said, in about 15 minutes, I need to get the scooter out. Can you guys help me? And they're like, yeah, bring your scooter right here. Just wait until we tell you to go. 15 minutes later, 2 bouncers with flashlights come through. And if you ever want to feel like a rock star, like I felt like I had an entourage, 2 bouncers cleared the way for a scooter to get through it. I was totally amazed. I was like, oh, this is what it feels like.
So let me add to that, because this is another great example of that happening. So my husband and I went to the Women's March last January, and I went on my scooter, and they had an area set aside for people with disabilities. So there would, you know, you'd have access to seeing an interpreter, you'd have access to a lot of different things, and you could be there. And the person who was accompanying you was able to stand sort of back from you but be available. I was not feeling well. I also, like Bob Langley, have cancer, and so I have days when I feel awful. And it was chilly and damp, and we'd been there a long time, and I wanted to leave. And the thing that I thought was great is that they were so prepared for everybody. I mean, I don't know how many people were there. All I know is that they cleared the way. It was all that you do is you yell, wheelchair coming through, and people parted. Now, this is a crowd that may have known that more, but they had people leading you. It took us forever to literally get out of the crowd, to just we live downtown, to get across, but we had assistance. And so when we think about what we do at meetings, and one of the things that I think is sad is that often meetings, and Kara's daughter Ashley experienced this when we did this event at this inclusive meetings at PCMA. She was on a scooter, and she realized that, number one, people often don't make eye contact, even people who know you. The other was the inaccessibility of restrooms, and the other was simply the ability to get through those ropes and those lines without having somebody with her to say, wheelchair coming through, please clear the way, please help us. And so there are so many, maybe it's simplistic to say that to me they are common sense. To me, it's being polite, it's being empathetic, it's helping people do that. And I want to comment on something that Cricket said that I think is great. And she says the only temporary condition, she put temporary in quotes, is being able-bodied. And she's absolutely right, because it is very rare for someone, anyone, not to at some point lose the ability to be able-bodied, whether it is for any reason. And so I think that we have to think differently about how we do all of this. When I think about team building, this is part of it is because of my losing my ability to stand and to walk. The other part is that I'm a strong introvert and don't want to be forced to walk around a room and meet people. I think we have to take into consideration that not all team building works for all people. And that's where I think working with someone like you comes in, because not only do you know what you're doing with team building, you have a sensibility that I think is very different. And when we had that conversation, I literally was blown away by your ability to understand this. And I think that you're having gone through this with your mother. I think after the accident on the motorcycle, I think that you have, and getting out of that nightclub, I think that you have a very different sensibility. And by sharing that and sharing it with clients and saying, have you thought about, are these things we can do? Are we, as we look at where we're going to have people, I love what you did with the young man who became the resource. That to me was brilliant, and finding a way for people to be included in different ways.
Well, thank you so much for that, Joan. We've been friends for a long time, and thank you so much for the praise. That this is our 20th year of business, and inside of that time, that's the thing that you can't replace is that 20 years of experience. And I do that for other people, Joan. I'm pretty sure you do it too. We can't help ourselves. We walk around someone else's meeting and we react to stuff and going,
yes, we do.
What about this? What about this? We could be so much better. Well, I think we're at the stage here where I know all of you have been listening in. I would love to see if anyone would like to chime in here, either with a comment or a question. The way you can do that is you say your name and I'll acknowledge you, and then you can go ahead. So if anybody would like to either ask a question, I know that Joan and I still have about 45,000 minutes of material. We're not going to do it today. We would like to serve you. So anybody want to jump in?
Yes, Cricket.
Okay, Cricket, go ahead.
And I'm jumping in because I need to be off to do other things. But I just wanted to note that the industry is hospitality. And if you're going to be a good host, if you're going to be a hospitable place, then some of this, instead of worrying about the law and the legal aspects of making things accessible for people with disabilities, I think we need to look at how we can be hospitable to everyone who walks in the door or rolls in the door or however they get in the door. And the difficulty, part of what I do as a minister is try to make the church venue not just the building, but the attitude of everyone in the place, that we're all welcome. And it may be that someone's going to need a little extra of something or another, but you do that because you want a hospitable place and a safe place to be. So that's my contribution, I hope, and I'm off to do priesty things.
Wait,
yeah.
Before you sign off, just a quick question. So, from your experience, both as a meeting planner, an association executive, and now with a church, or this church, and before with another, and doing diocesan meetings, what's the best way that we can convey to people, other people attending a meeting? And I think this goes to what John said too about the elevator experience, and nobody looks at anybody, and people don't know. I've had horrible experiences with people when I'm on my scooter pretending I don't exist. And so what's the best way to help create that atmosphere of inclusion?
Well, from a theological standpoint, part of what I have promised is to try to see the divine in every person, and that because we are, as I believe, created in the image of the divine, we're supposed to seek that out in everyone. Sometimes it's a whole lot easier than others, but I guess part of it is if you look for the human dignity in every person, and you make that a priority, then you'll just want to make them welcome. If you know that there's dignity in each person that walks through your venue, your meeting, you want to treat that person with dignity, they will treat you with dignity, and I think the world needs a whole lot more of that.
Thank you for that. Thank you for joining us today, and go off and do. I know that your important work, and I am forever, grateful to you for coming to that meeting, and for you becoming my friend and being my resource for so very many years.
Et cum spiritum tuo. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Cricket. What a great contribution. Well, let me just add on to that, because Joan, we didn't quite get into this part. Inclusion to me now too. I'm doing a lot of work in diversity and inclusion here in Seattle, and my diversity work goes a way back. I'll try and do as the shortest version possible. But Joan, do you know what a paper sun is?
A paper sun?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I do.
Okay, great. See, this is the piece of history that nobody knows, that I teach at every moment that I can, but because it's really around inclusion and exclusion. So, there's a new law, what is it, the Pride or hold on a sec. There's a new law that they're trying to pass. It's called the RAISE Act. Yeah, the RAISE Act. And it's trying to exclude a bunch of Asian countries. Well, I always post at that. I'm like, hey, you guys, America's been doing this for a long time. There was something called the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1888. And it's when they were trying to prevent all the Chinese people from coming because they thought we were stealing all the railroad jobs. And so it limited the number of Chinese people to come into the country to 106. And why it's so landmark, it's the first U.S. law ever to discriminate against an entire race. And so, but there was a rice famine, and so my grandfather wanted to get in, and so there's a loophole. There's a loophole in the law that says if you're the son of a merchant here in the United States, you're a citizen. And so San Francisco hits in 1906 afterwards, and it burns everything, including the courthouse. The courthouse has the birth records. And so the courthouse goes, hey, you guys, if you had any kids, could you come to the courthouse? And so every Chinese guy in town's like, yeah, I got 5 kids. I got 5. So there were paper sons. They were invented. They were invented and sent back. They were sold on the market back in China, and that you could come through. And then if you ever go to San Francisco, please take the time to go not to Alcatraz, but go to Angel Island. Angel Island. And it goes right back to the beginning when we talked about greeting, the way that the people were greeted. So you have to memorize all these facts about your fake family that you can't even remember about your existing house. And then you got to throw the book away 3 days before you get there and try and memorize it. And then your first experience of America is men in white lab coats, and they're separating the men from the women for the children. Right? They're doctors, and they're doing that for quarantine and health reasons, but the color of white in the Chinese culture is the color of a ghost.
Right.
Welcome to America. And so, that's what we're really talking about in this inclusion part. Like, how do we make everyone feel inclusion? On the best part, I just was member of, I got a chance to videotape a part of a panel. There's 80 or 90 people that collaborated together, and they have an 80-page free document with the best practices of inclusion and diversity in corporate America. So I'm going to try and post that with this when
Thank you.
anyways, I think that's another important aspect of inclusion.
I think it's a huge aspect, and I, like you, have been involved in diversity and inclusion, I would say my whole life, and that comes from being Jewish, having living around Holocaust survivors, living in a very diverse neighborhood, living where there was something called blockbusting in the 50s that wanted to keep African American families out of what had been traditionally fairly white neighborhoods. I know that as a child, and I'm comfortable saying this on the playground, I was called a Christ killer. We were isolated oddly with in public school, that the non-Jewish children went off campus, off the school grounds, to Bible school. It was either once a week or once a month. I just know it was awful, and it made you, back to the issue of pointing you out and saying you're not like one of us. And I think that one of the things that I have found, and I'll use what Cricket said about the issue of being hospitable, is that we want to make people feel included. And the difficult thing is when you go to a meeting or an event, when you are one of only maybe a handful of whatever it is you are that's different from everybody else. And I think that, without going into direct politics, I think that we in this country are dealing now with some very big issues of exclusion, and that we have an opportunity in hospitality and meetings to make people feel included and to do things that allow it. I have a dear friend who is Muslim, and she was a meeting planner, and she left the industry because she couldn't really go to any events of the industry meetings because everybody served alcohol. And she tried to explain that and tried to say, can't you do even a lunch meeting where alcohol's not served? And oh no, we're the hospitality industry, we have to have alcohol. And so I think if we begin to understand different cultures, if we begin to understand people's backgrounds, if we look, as you said, into the history of how people got here and why they're here and what they've been through and what they're going through now, which is both on ADA and on other issues of inclusion, I think that we can do better. I think it's raising that awareness, and I am beyond grateful to you for what you do and have done, and to do this today, and to those who joined us and who will, I know there are a lot of people who are interested in listening later. And my hope is that we can build on this, that we don't just have diversity and inclusion committees with all of our organizations that sort of talk about theory, but in practice, there's, as we say in Yiddish, bupkas or nothing, that we can really make a difference. And I think maybe this is my idealistic side. My idealistic side says that meetings are a way to not only educate, it's a way to make people feel part of a community. And once you feel part of that community, all kinds of doors, as we say, are opened, and the opportunities are greater. And I think that we each have that obligation to do that.
I love that. It's like when you know you're in the right meeting is when you get there and you feel like you're home, right? And I hope every meeting planner has that as one of their goals, but I know that I've been the recipient of that. Well, Joan, we're almost out of time, but we're going to get a chance here to give each person one sentence to kind of sum up either what they learned or something else here, and then you get the final word, Joan, right?
Okay.
We're going to start here. Mitch, can you kind of just sum up what you had in one sentence from today's your involvement hanging on here?
It always takes me. I think it's just, seeing everyone as equal, seeing the divine in everyone. I think that was a really good point that, we're just all trying to get through life, and let's just make it as easy for everyone as we possibly can.
Thank you so much. That is the best quote, I think, that came out. Of course, Cricket gets to stare at that. See the divine in every person. Now we know why she's a priest or priestess. Sue, how about you?
Have to unmute. I would agree. See the divine, and then thinking about it from Joan's vantage point of hospitality. Somehow that has gotten lost. It's about meetings and gatherings and networking, but being hospitable, and not to get political either, but the hospitality, the welcoming. All of it seems to have gone by the wayside for a while. And I think thinking of our events and our meetings as a way of inclusion and being hospitable really puts it in the right perspective. So thank you for that, Joan.
Oh, you're welcome. We are welcome too. Thank you, Sue. Let's see, we're on to Mark. Mark, are you still there?
I sure am.
Sum it up in a sentence.
I just think as I plan, I like to think of my job as creating customer experiences.
Yes.
And it's just the reminder that everyone is my customer. So everyone should have the same experience, whether they have mobility issues, whether they are hearing impaired or sight impaired or have sensory impairments or whatever it is, they are still my customer. So as it's been said, everyone is the same and they all should experience the same thing while at that event or that meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. You remind me of one of my good friends, Laurent, who works at Microsoft, right? He had a monocle, like that was the way his vision was, but he was like one of the greatest testers at Microsoft, despite, you know, he had to use a monocle for a computer screen, and he was so great to see his spirit like that. Kara, what about you?
Yeah, so a lot of great things came out of this. I do appreciate jumping on at the last minute here, Joan, and thank you for sharing. I just wanted to share one thing. I did put it in the comments section, but the term forced intimacy, because there's so many people today who have disabilities that are not visible, we as I think as humans naturally want to ask questions and know more about what people's disability is, but that forced intimacy is just very unfair and not something that should have to be justified in order to get the accommodations.
Well, thank you, Kara. I think out of this is the most provocative piece in here, because you're right. I think I chatted back to you and I said, I felt obligated to share this, to explain, why do I even have to do that? Why can't I just be that way? And, you know, I didn't even think about that. That's what I'm saying. That's how unconscious that is. And that's how expected, I guess, it is as a social norm to do that. And in the end, sometimes I shouldn't have to feel that way. And that's worth investigating. That's like a whole nother, you know, conversation to have. So thank you for that. And again, I think my last part here too is just thank you to Joan and bringing people like Cricket and Kara and everyone else that's here with immense amount of experience. Like I didn't even think about somebody who actually worked on the ADA Act being here and going, what, that's impact, that's leverage, and that's impact, and that's what I strive for, at least in my day and my life, is to have at least that much impact. So that's what I'm grateful, and thank you for everyone who showed up, and of course grateful for you, Joan. Thank you so much.
And I to you, John.
And you get the last word. So how would you like to sum up?
So here's my last word. You know, it's interesting about having to share one's disability or one's needs. And I would say that if the world were in better shape, if facilities were more accommodating, if restrooms didn't have doors you can't get into when you're on a scooter or anything else, when the front desk doesn't have a lowered area, when the guest rooms are not universal design, to me that we are still going to have to share that information. And in some cases, I think it's okay. Children sadly are taught when they see someone with an obvious disability or with an obvious difference from them, that they shouldn't talk, they shouldn't ask. And I think the more we ask and the more we learn and the more we just say, do you want assistance? What can I do to help? And if somebody says, no, I don't want any, that's fine. But I am so grateful when, for instance, when I'm coming, and today I'll go over to our outdoor market, when I come back on my scooter and we don't have push things on the door of our building, when total strangers will see me struggling to get in and they say, do you want some help? I am just overwhelmingly joyful. And so I think that if we all become more aware of not only the divine in people, simply just of people and who they are and what they need, and if we provide those accommodations before we have to ask, then I think we will have an easier time of making, here I go with my idealism, making the world hospitable and inclusive for everybody, which is my goal in life.
Well, thank you so much, Joan. It's so funny that the word hospitable and hospitality just keeps coming back. And that's what our industry is named. And some days it forgets about that part. And so most of all, I just want to wrap up with this. Thank you for including everyone else who's here. And usually we get a couple hundred people who will watch the video afterwards. So just know that you made an impact. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate you, and hopefully we'll get the chance to spend some time together soon.
Me too. Thank you so much. And thank you all. And Mark, I look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay,
Likewise.
guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.